The world feels the Indian whirlwind. The Indian century is about to come. However, Graham Ellison, founding dean of Harvard Kennedy School and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense, poured cold water on it. In June this year, Graham Ellison published an article in Foreign Policy analyzing why India will not surpass China and will not become the next superpower. Ellison also cautiously reminded U.S. policymakers not to have illusions about India. He analyzed 4 reasons. In addition, he specifically emphasized the pessimistic conclusion about India by the late Singaporean leader Kuan Yew. As the founding father of Singapore, Kuan Yew was known for his outstanding wisdom and gained international reputation. Before and after his death in 2014, Kuan Yew expressed disappointment in India many times. Kuan Yew had placed very high expectations on India. He expected India to become strong and become a major force in Asia to check China. For this reason, he had given sincere advice to successive Indian leaders. In the end, he was disappointed and came to a very pessimistic conclusion that India would forever be just a future country and could not be compared with China. Ellison said that even if Kuan Yew were alive today, even if India has launched reforms, Kuan Yew would still not have expectations for India. Rather than Kuan Yew's resolute pessimism, this is more of Ellison's own pessimistic conclusion. In the years after Kuan Yew's death in 2015, especially in recent years, unprecedented changes have taken place in the international political and economic order. Prime Minister Modi has also opened up a distinctly different new era in India. Let's take a look at the 4 points of Ellison's pessimistic view on India. First, he believes that people have misinterpreted India's demographic dividend again. The idea that a huge young population will create an economic miracle is an illusion. He believes that people were also excited about this around 2006. At that time, the World Economic Forum in Davos praised India as the fastest-growing free market democracy in the world. India's trade minister also believed that India would soon surpass China. Ellison did not analyze why the demographic dividend did not become a huge driving force. I think the key issue is that the demographic dividend must be based on large-scale employment. In 2006, India was not in a position to become the world's factory and did not have opportunities for large-scale employment. Therefore, the huge population became a burden instead. At that time, it was the golden age of Made in China. China was like a huge magnet that attracted the transfer of global industrial chains. Capital and technology flocked to China. It was the honeymoon period between China's labor market and the transfer of industrial chains. But the times have changed. The underlying logic of international relations has changed. China has become the Western world's strategic competitor. Technological blockade and de-Chinization of China have become inevitable policies. This is indeed a historic opportunity for India. The logic that China's position as the world's factory will inevitably be lost is twofold. Western countries must withdraw from strategic security perspective. Likewise, China also needed to emphasize self-reliance and controllability for political security reasons. The industrial structure formed under the national strategy of self-reliance and control is inevitably incompatible with the marketized international economy. Therefore, the current decoupling between China and the Western world has both external pressure and internal impetus. India waved the banner of Make in India at this moment, which just met the needs of current international conflicts and division of labor. India is the only country that can replace China in terms of scale and size, and its underlying political logic also matches that of the West. Against the backdrop of Make in India, India's demographic dividend will have enormous value for the first time. When Kuan Yew was alive, there was no sign that the world would move in this direction. It seemed that China had fully won and was also harmonious with the West. However, in the few years after Kuan Yew's death, the global landscape began to reorient and reorganize. Moreover, the new order formed this time will be a long cycle, likely determining the direction and pattern of the world for the next half to 1 century. Unfortunately, it seems Graham Allison did not see this. Graham Allison believes that although India has achieved astonishing growth in the past 2 years, becoming the world's 5th largest economy surpassing the UK, its economy is much smaller than China's. China's manufacturing, exports and GDP are 2 to 3 times that of India, and its economic volume is 5 times that of India. India's is only $3.2 trillion while China's is $17.7 trillion. Allison just listed the huge differences in the scale and tonnage of the current economies of China and India. I think this numerical comparison is completely meaningless. What determines the future development speed of China and India are not static inventory data, but their current positioning on the international stage and development trends, as well as the flow and scale of factors of production such as capital, technology, and talent. If one economy's trend is slowing down, even negative growth, and the other is accelerating on a very large scale, then the variables are decisive. The other 2 factors Allison analyzed are also static in nature. One is talent in high-tech industries and the number of existing high-tech companies. China has global leading technology companies like TikTok while India does not. China owns 65% of global AI patents while India only has 3%. In terms of AI, China is the only global competitor to the United States. Allison also analyzed that the quality and efficiency of China's labor force is better than India's. In general, Allison's analysis is static without seeing the overall economic reintegration brought about by the fundamental changes in the current international political and economic landscape. Here are the main reasons why the Indian era is coming. First, China's relationship with the West has been repositioned for the 2nd time in 40 years, a systemic strategic rival. China is the only competitor with the capability and willingness to compete globally. This positioning means that technological blockade and de-Chinization will be basic and long-term policies. Under the small courtyard high wall strategy, the vitality of China's high-tech industries is not sustainable. The increasingly meticulous technology blockade policies of the US and its allies have hit the soft spot of China's high-tech industries. The reorganization of industrial chains has already begun, and de-Chinization and de-risking are irresistible. China's epidemic control policies in the past 3 years have further accelerated this trend. In the reorganization of the world economic landscape, only India has the scale and potential to completely replace China. A historic opportunity has been pushed to India's door. India's reforms since the 1980s have always lagged behind China's. India, which did not thoroughly shake off the Soviet model of a planned economy until 1991, also achieved some development. But China had already become the main target of that round of international industrial transfer. India got little more than leftovers. However, since Modi came to power, there have been significant changes in both international and domestic landscapes. The intensity of India's reforms since 2014 is unprecedented. In particular, the 2017 reform that unified the national tax system has improved India's business environment relatively well. The Modi government's national strategy of Make in India corresponds to the Western trend of de-Chinization. As long as India dares to further reform and seize this opportunity for several consecutive years, Make in India could have a miraculous effect. Third, the openness and goodwill of major economies towards India. India's international image has been widely well received. Yoga, Buddhism, Bollywood films, and other symbols of Indian culture have spread its soft power and global appeal. To become a permanent member of the UN Security Council, India has also actively participated in international affairs and taken the initiative to undertake international obligations. India has been deeply accepted by the world's major countries. There is an inconspicuous but very interesting indicator that illustrates this well: India's military cooperation with other countries. Although India adheres to a non-aligned foreign policy, it has far more extensive and in-depth military cooperation relationships with countries around the world, especially in the Asia-Pacific, than China. China has in-depth military cooperation with only 3 countries in the Asia-Pacific: North Korea, Russia, and Pakistan. Under the Quad mechanism, India has in-depth military cooperation with the US, Japan, South Korea, and Australia, as well as deeper military cooperation than China's with the UK, France, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, and so on, including annual military exercises. It shows these countries are wary of China and the level of cooperation is relatively low. On the contrary, they are more open and trusting towards India. Fourth, the rise of Indian origin people in global politics and business. As national leaders, Indian origin people include UK Prime Minister Sunak, US Vice President Harris, Portuguese Prime Minister Costa, Singapore President Halima Yacob, Irish Prime Minister Varadkar. There are 7 incumbent leaders currently. There are even more in the business world, to the point where some joke that Indians are ruling the world. There are many Indian origin CEOs in global tech giants like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, Twitter, and countless more in consumer fields like Chanel, Gap, and finance like Barclays and Deloitte. Statistics show that Indian origin CEOs account for up to 30% of the global 500 companies. It has undoubtedly become a cultural phenomenon that Indian origin people have become leaders in global politics and economics. This shows the compatibility and inclusiveness of Indian culture with mainstream world civilizations, as well as its cradle for nurturing managerial talents. It has immense potential influence on the rise of India itself. Although India still has many problems, such as inadequate infrastructure, incomplete industrial supporting systems, relatively low labor quality, low product quality rates, and so on, there is no doubt that the grand climate for India's rise has formed. China in the 1980s had all these problems too, but they did not hinder China's growth. If India seizes this historic opportunity, the 21st century will be India's century. A piece of news 2 days ago can serve as a footnote to the India story. Despite the many problems Indian-made iPhones have faced, such as lower quality rates than those made in China, Apple is giving India an increasing share, and amid ridicule from Chinese, the iPhone 15 has been produced in India and even sold to the Chinese market. Even more symbolic is the news that Apple has decided to expand its production capacity in India 5-fold over the next 5 years. India is the next China. History has given it opportunities. India is not the next China either. Once it seizes the opportunities, it will not break and derail midway like China did. India will forge ahead and, as a new engine of the world economy, pull the world into a long cycle of prosperity and growth.